And we're live, Clive.
Very good.
I'll do John G. Sutton.
Indeed. The
infamous John G. Sutton. Before we start, guys, listen. Read all the comments, really kind comments about John and why wouldn't he be. I've got two things to ask you and then away you go. I'll just sit and listen. The first one is,
right.
Can you just, I think this bit is important. I always try to get it across. Yeah. People will take away from this. There's a lot of bad things. There's a lot of shocking things. You did work with some good people though, didn't you?
Yeah, some good people. I would say that the majority of the prison staff were there to do what I was doing. That's to earn a living and to provide for the families. They weren't there to entertain themselves at the expense of the inmates.
However, there was that culture and a lot of people were fearful, weren't they?
A lot of staff were fearful of this because if you got on the wrong side of the clique that was actually running it, because there was like a gang of bully boys who were they weren't exactly in charge of the prison, but they were very much supported by the ethos of Strangeways in the 70s. Because Strangeways in the 70s was a reflection of Strangeways in the 1940s, 1950s, because the staff who'd been there during that time had trained the staff that were there in the 70s.
Yeah.
So it was the same kind of regime, and it was a regime that was enforced on fear. And that's how they ran it at Strangeways, bouncing people down the block, giving them a good hiding. And I didn't see anybody win. I saw a lot of people get seriously hurt. And I attempted at times to intervene, and as we will discover as we proceed, it turned out that soon it was my turn.
And this people often say to me that, you know, if you see something bad and don't do anything, you're as bad as them people. But there's another way to look at that as well. And I think, you know, if those good people had left their job, you know, then you don't know they're getting replaced by or whatever, do you? At the end of the day,
well, the problem is, if you're there and you actually condone it, then there is a saying, isn't it? It's a well-known saying, for evil to prosper, all it requires is for good men to do nothing.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if you do see evil and you do something about it, at places like Strangeways, where it's a part of the system, where it's endemic within the actual culture, and you try and interfere with that, then that system is going to turn on you, which is what happened to me.
And the other one is, somebody said, I interrupted you when you were talking about your degree. Why did you take your degree and what degrees did you take?
I was studying to get a degree in law, and in 1981 I was working in the prison service. The POA had come to an agreement with the governor that we were required to do compulsory overtime. Compulsory overtime meant that you were working an average of between 50 and 60 hours a week. Now, working 50, 60 hours a week and studying at the same time is very difficult, but I didn't just have that. I got a telephone call from my grandfather, who was seriously ill, and he was asking if I'd go and see him. So I went to see my grandfather, who lived in a little village called Foleridge, which is in Lancashire, on the border of Lancashire and Yorkshire. And he was unable to maintain, he couldn't look after himself anymore. His wife had died a few years before, so he wanted me to look after him. So I got him in the car as best I could and brought him back to my house, and myself and my wife looked after my grandfather. But he was in such a condition that at times, on my lunch hour at Strangeways, I couldn't take a lunch hour. I had to drive back and help my wife to maintain my grandfather, who'd fallen out of bed or was on the floor in the bathroom. So I was backwards and forwards whilst working, and I just couldn't maintain that. And at the same time, my wife's mother was taken seriously ill, so we were going to visit my wife's mother in hospital and looking after my granddad, and we looked after this for 3 years.
And you had a family.
And I had a daughter, yeah, that I was looking after. And there were certain problems with my daughter that we had to deal with. She had to backwards and forwards to hospital. She had numerous operations, and it was just too much. And eventually I realised that no matter how much I wanted this, it wasn't going to happen. And then when it came to the exams, I didn't pass. I didn't pass the exam.
Well, you know, you can
It may be the reason why. I mean, it may be sour grapes, you know. I don't know. But I didn't pass the exams, and eventually I said, well, that's it. I'll just get on with it. Which is what I did.
Sweet. So, hope that answers...
Well, that's the answer to that question.
Yeah. So, your union, if you could call it that. Fire away.
Yeah, well, we can call it that because that's what it was, you see. As I was said, I was studying law, and the solicitors that were teaching me, you know, I told them about what was happening. They said, well, you know, you've obviously not got a trade union there. So they helped me to formulate the application to the certification office, and it required that we have an inaugural meeting and that the General Secretary was elected and that there was an elected treasurer, and that we had the ability to function as a trade union. So I set up a meeting in the centre of Manchester, and it was filmed actually by the BBC in their 1979-1980 documentary Strangeways. It's in the segment called Screws.
I will put the links to that documentary in all the parts to John's story.
So we held the inaugural meeting of the Prison Force Federation, which is was a certificated trade union, and as I said, the BBC filmed it, and we were off and running. The thing was that the staff started to become really frightened about this because the Prison Officers Association, as I previously said, were trying to paint me as some kind of ogre who was being funded by Colonel Gaddafi, and they said I was some kind of communist. I mean, basically, I just wanted trade union representation for the non-supervisory grade officers, because the Prison Officers Association was being run both nationally and locally by management.
In my time, for me, still the same.
Yeah, it's difficult to I mean, people can imagine this. Imagine being working down the mine and having the owner of the mine, yeah, as your chairman of your union. That's how ridiculous it is. The people who are actually designing policy and running the establishment were also running the trade union. Now, for the Trade Union Congress to allow this, how do they allow a pseudo trade union to be a member of the TUC? Let me tell you how they do it. Because there was a motion passed to the Trade Union Congress, I believe it was in 1920, and it was called the Bridlington Agreement. Now, the Bridlington Agreement insisted that no other trade union may poach members from an existing trade union. So let's say you were a baker, yeah, and you were in the bakers trade union. You couldn't set up a cake makers trade union and take members from it because of the Bridlington Agreement. And the Prison Officers Association were, and maybe still are, a member of the TUC. So when I set up the Prison Force Federation, they set about shutting me down because they said I, as the General Secretary of the Prison Force Federation, was poaching members from the Prison Officers Association. My argument was that the Prison Officers Association was, in effect, a tool of management put there by the Home Office to control the staff. It was a staff association, it was not a trade union, and therefore I was not in breach of the Bridlington Agreement. Because,
I don't want to interrupt you, John. Can I ask you then to explain to people, so the whole union thing at that time, was that part of the culture?
Oh, everybody was in the Prison Officers
Well,
Association.
but you know what I'm saying? The culture, sort of the dark ages and all that, was that part of it? You know, people were compliant, people were in fear, they did as they were told.
As they were told, I mean, the governor effectively was in control of the trade union, because if there was ever any disputes, they would say, all right, well, we'll come in to see the governor with you, and they'd go in and sail you down the river. Well, they didn't sail me down the river, I'm telling you that, because I wouldn't have anything to do with them, because it's quite plain to me. You only have to walk around with your eyes open to see what these people were. They were a bunch of brown-nosed bastards who were suckling up to the governor for their own promotion. They got all the cushy jobs, all the nice little numbers, all went to the POA committee, the local committee. That's how they did it. And they just kept the staff in line. Now, because I was being attacked by the POA now as the General Secretary of the Prison Force Federation, and I had members, I had about 150 members in strange ways, all wanted to be in the union, but the POA set about maligning me, painting me as some kind of demonic force. So I went on to BBC Manchester, the TV show, and I gave a talk to the BBC. It was important to me to get this message out, that if we didn't have proper representation, then what was going to happen was the bully boys and the people who were virtually back from the 1940s, back from the 1950s, still running the jails today, they were going to rule it with like a force of fear. So I went on the television and told everybody that this was not to happen. What we had to do was modernise the prison service and pay staff a proper wage, because they weren't being, it was slowly eroding. The wage was slowly, there was no pay rises. So people were working excessive overtime to make a basic living. And I tried to tell the staff, listen, if you're not paid a proper basic wage, you're going to work overtime. Do you really want to work 6-7 days a week, 60 hours a week, just to make a living? Because that's what you're having to do. So the union should have actually said, we have to have a living wage, otherwise we're endangering the staff. And listen, the staff actually thought, well, we're doing this, but we'll get a pension at the end of it. We will get a pension at the end of it. I did some research, as I mentioned before, for a Labour MP called Eric Heffer, who was a big name Labour MP, a left-wing Labour MP, and in return for me doing research for him on the National Front and all the rest of it, I asked him to ask a question in Parliament, and the question I asked him to ask was, what is the average amount of time that a prison officer with full service, that's 30 years, spends in retirement? Because everybody's talking about they're working for the pension. Now, what would you think? What would you think, Sam, would be a reasonable amount of time?
Well, I know, sadly, but, you know, you'd like to think that someone who'd worked of most of their life in a job would be able to settle down, enjoy life a bit, and, you know, they'd earn that pension, which meant they could relax and do things, not just sit at home.
Yeah, not be on the breadline.
Yeah.
So how long would you expect somebody who's, say, 30 years in a job, at 55 years of age, say?
Well, you know, you would expect people to live well into the 70s or whatever, wouldn't you?
That's what I would have thought. You know, we would have thought 15, 20 years perhaps, retirement. Eric Heffer asked the question in Parliament, and the answer, it surprised me, the answer was 6 months. 6 months. So people were working all this time, 60 hours a week in the prisons, and when they got to the end of the 30 years, they retired thinking they got a proper pension. 6 months is what they got.
Exactly, 6 months.
That's
it
the
doesn't
average.
equate, does it? Can I ask you, John? You've already said that you had a lot going on at home. Again, I'm thinking, you know, as you're talking about this, you know, you're getting this union, not letting the absolute stress. You're in a stressful job. You're already, you know, your name's been tarnished. You've got a lot going on at home. You've got a family. I can't see, is it just the man you are that made you do that? Because it must have been incredibly stressful life. Incredibly stressful.
I won't say it wasn't. I'll say that it definitely was, and it hurt me a great deal to think that the staff that I was trying to help were turning against me because of what was happening. Because following my appearance on the BBC, the governor, who shall remain nameless as Norman Brown, seriously, he sat down.
You can see him on the documentary.
Yeah,
can't
you can see it on the documentary. He sat down with the governor. The governor sat down with the chief officer, and decided what charge they were going to bring against me. Yeah.
Criminal charge.
No, I'm not sure if it wasn't a criminal charge. It was a charge under the disciplinary code.
Like bringing the prison servants into disrepute or something like that.
Failing to accept orders from the governor and all the rest of it. Anyway, they charged me with that. And I said to him, at the hearing, and I got it somewhere on tape, I hid a tape recorder.
Did you?
Yeah.
Tape recorders then, it must have been.
No, it was a little... Anyway, I managed to record him, but I said to him, I remember saying this, said, this is beyond your powers, it's ultra vires, you cannot.
What's that mean, John?
It means, it's a legal term, it means it's beyond the authority.
Right, okay.
I said, it's beyond your authority to discipline me for speaking to the press or speaking to anybody else because I am the elected General Secretary of a registered trade union. And under the Trade Union Act, a trade union official may do anything within his power to promote that trade union. So then when I appear on the television or speak to the press, that is exactly what I'm doing. And what you're doing here is in breach of the Trade Union Act. You can't do it. It's outside your authority. Right, I think they reduced me in seniority for 7 years and I was never going to be promoted and this, that, and the other. And I don't know if they fined me or anyway, but whatever they did, they stamped that and sent it off and I appealed and they lost.
For people, I mean, a lot of younger people now, people don't know about trade unions and that or whatever. But then, most companies you work for, a lot of companies, engineering companies I work for, various unions represented the workforce and along with managers, government or whatever, have to do with a lot of employment law and things like that, don't they?
Absolutely.
And a lot of places used to be that you had to be in a union, didn't they?
Yeah, they had to call it, it was termed a closed shop.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the days that I was doing this, was the days of a guy called Red Ted, who was the leader of the trade union movement in Leyland Motors at Birmingham. And he was infamous for, right, tools down, we're out.
Yeah, explain that, because yeah. I've worked where we've had that. Explain what it,
Yeah, well, basically, tools down, if the workforce feel that they've been impinged upon or abused in some way by the management, they don't negotiate with the management. They say, right, put your tools down, get out, and then the union trade committee and talk with the managers. But not at Strange Ways. It wasn't like that. It was the other way around. It was the governors that were in control, the chief officers that were running the place. And basically it was a closed shop until I burst it open and started this independent trade union, which, by the way, was funded by individuals paying in just a pittance, just enough money to pay for the stationery and the telephone calls. And when I went to speak at various prisons around the country, they had a collection to pay for my petrol and all that. So I didn't have any money. I'm not rich. And the idea of Colonel Gaddafi, oh yeah, come on boys, bring it on. Yeah, nothing. I had nothing. Anyway, following this attack by the governor and the chief officer, and the chief officer, by the way, was a member of the Prison Officers Association. Not a surprise. And he sat there with the governor prosecuting me. That's a disgrace. I mean, come on. Where's the prison service? Where are these guys? These are supposed to be tough guys, yeah? Oh, I'm a jailer. Yeah, well, stand up to your trade union. Stand up for yourself. They wouldn't do it. They were scared stiff. Anyway, let me get away from that. I'll just tell you a little bit about what happened. I was living at the time in a prison quarter, which is a house that's provided rent-free by the Home Office. They used to do that. I don't think they do it now. But it was the same for the police, you know.
Yeah, they sold them all off, I believe.
Yeah, but the police used to have it. Because my father was a police constable in, we lived at Prestwich. And then he moved to be a detective sergeant, and he was at Lee, and he ended up as a detective inspector. But for a period of time lived in a house provided by the police. Which I don't even know if they do that then. But anyway, I was living in a house that was provided by the Home Office. And myself and my wife just getting on with it quietly, as you would. It was in Cheetham Hill, by the way, which is not the most salubrious address in Manchester. And one night my wife said, will you have a look outside? Some dogs keep digging up the garden. You know, we tried to make it nice, you know. So I opened the door, and there was this big dog digging up the garden and crapping into the garden, defecating all over my garden. And standing at the edge of my garden was another prison officer. It was his dog. Yeah. I said, hey, come on. I said, do me a favour. Look after your dog. Don't let it do that to my garden. I know who you are. Press off, you know. I said, listen, you know who I am because you're at the front of the house, you know. I said, but you don't allow that. And the guy come up to me and head-butted me. Head-butted me in the head. Well, there was a bit of a kerfuffle because I didn't fall on the floor. And I eventually said to him, listen, just take your dog and go home, you know. You're basically a lout, you know. And as I turned round to walk into the house, which was a mistake, he jumped on my back. And as he jumped on my back, I fell to the floor and broke my right ankle. Well, if you've ever had a broken ankle, it is exceedingly painful. So I never got any sleep that night. The next day I went to the hospital, and they x-rayed me. It was fractured. They put it in a cast, and I was off work for 6 weeks. Of course, I made a formal complaint. Nothing happened. No, nothing at all. Nothing that I could see of. And at the time, I was off work for 6 weeks, as I said, but at the time I was off work for 6 weeks, opposite me, one evening, it would be about 9:30, 10 o'clock, I heard these sirens and a great kerfuffle. And there was about 3 police cars in the street. And I looked out, me and my wife looked out from the front to see what was going on. And the guy opposite us, I don't know what he'd been doing, but the police had him in handcuffs. He was a great big giant of an Irishman, but a prison officer. And they dragged him out of his house. And as they dragged him out of his house, he had these big police handcuffs on, and he snapped them like that. And then he grabbed all the 2 of the policemen, one in each hand, and he was battering that until the police overwhelmed him, got him in the back of the van, and that was the last time we saw him. Gone. I believe he was taken to Risley on remand, but he never returned to the prison again.
Obviously you got the guy with the dog, so where you live with the other prison officers around you?
Yeah.
Did you feel safe there?
Not particularly, no, after that incident, because at this time I was starting to attract a great deal of media attention. I mean, this is not just BBC Manchester, Radio Manchester, it's not local stuff. I was being written up in the Daily Telegraph. The crime reporter for the Daily Telegraph was called Peter Sandrock, as I remember. Yeah, and Peter Sandrock interviewed me on a number of occasions.
Was he like writing the articles on you in a good light?
Factual.
So just saying it how it is,
saying
dark
how it is, yeah.
ages,
He wasn't saying
things need to change.
yeah, he wasn't saying anything like that. He wasn't saying this is a hero's debut. None of that nonsense. No,
What did you consider yourself? Just somebody who
I
was standing up for what you believed in?
I'll be honest, I was angry. I was angry. I joined in January 1975 and I believed it was a career. And by the time we got to 79, 80, it was quite obvious this was no career. What was happening was they were dumbing this place right down to the point where I was going to be little more than a gatekeeper. And that the wages, they were deteriorating. As I said, when I started in 75, a prison officer was earning more than a policeman. By the time we got to 79, 80, we were way adrift. And not only that, there was absolutely no potential of it getting any better. And it was being controlled by the management through the POA. So I could see this. Now listen, I knew that the POA was not a trade union. Now there are certain regulations that you must fulfill to be an independent trade union. You must have your own office, your own regional offices, you must have your own facilities like telephone, stationery, you must have your own ability to function as a trade union. The POA had none of these. No regional offices, they didn't pay for their own telephone calls, they didn't even pay for their own stationery. It was all done inside the prisons. Well, I could understand that because it was run by the management. So, to be an independent trade union, you have to have a certificate. Now, all right, I didn't do this on my own, I'll be perfectly honest. I spoke to the solicitors that were teaching me law at Manchester University, and they said there is a requirement for this certificate, but it can be revoked. So they helped me to file an application to the certification officer to have the Certificate of Independence of the Prison Officers Association removed. So they would no longer be a member of the TUC, which, let's face it, they shouldn't be, should they? Come on. Yeah, they're not a union, they're management. So it was about a 20-page report that I put in to the certification office and submitted this. I heard back the POA had to fight this. They had to fight it because otherwise they would no longer be a trade union,
Yep.
which they bloody weren't a trade union. Let's face it. I believe it cost them over £100,000 to defend this. They were absolutely wild about this.
And John G. Sutton is becoming ever more popular, I would imagine.
Wow, they were really angry with me by this time. Absolutely angry. And I found that when I was working in the prisons, there were people who were basically just creeping round the management. They say, oh, we're not working with him. and staff were coming up to me and said, they wanted to join. And my advice to them was, I understand that you want to support what I'm doing. Just stand back, because if you get too close to this, you are going to find trouble.
Really?
Well, they would find trouble.
No, I'm not denying that, John. What I'm saying is, you were saying, you weren't saying come and join me, give me strength. You were saying
stand back and
because you were concerned about people.
Yeah, they would definitely get trouble. And I'm a different kind of character. I mean, I know it's mad, and when you talk about stress, yeah, but in a way, this was a challenge, and these people had interfered with my life. They'd taken a career that I hoped to make, and I hoped to work the hours here, intending to go all the way. I even took the promotion examination, and I came 10th in the country. They've got the paperwork, and it's a competition, the Home Office Principal Officers examination. It's not a straightforward exam that you get 70% and you pass. You take the exam and you're entered into a competition against all the other entrants. and only the top 25% get through.
So how many people would roughly have taken that exam? Have you any
I've got
idea?
it written down. I think it was 1,500.
1,500 and you come...
10th. That's not too bad.
So you
considering I didn't do I didn't do any studying for that whatsoever. Nothing. But
You're
I
not
tell
an
you what I
unintelligent man, but you
No,
obviously got a manager's job after that, didn't you?
did. No, did I heck? And nothing. Eh? I tell you what I did. I took the exam. I knew who was marking the exam. It was being marked by chief officers. So the first thing that I thought was, if it's being marked by chief officers and I start writing very quickly, they're not going to be able to read my writing. So the first thing I'm going to get extra points for is if they can read it. So I printed it. I put it in capitals and wrote it all out without. I didn't join up the letters. I didn't do real.
Yeah, that's how I have to write. My writing's crap.
Yeah. Well, so they could absolutely read everything,
yeah.
And I bullet pointed all the steps, because it was scenarios like you discussed about.
But the thing is, if you come 10th out of all them people, it was done properly. I was thinking, because you were infamous, that yours had gone in the bin.
You would have thought so, yeah, but it didn't.
So there were some people with integrity then.
They wouldn't. It might have not been even my name on it. It might have just had a number.
Right. Okay.
I don't know how they did it, but anyway, I came 10th, but they never got me anywhere. I did the governor's exam as well. The governor's exam, when I did it, it was in 2 parts. It was done at HMP Wakefield, actually. And it was in 2 parts. The first part was an IQ test, and the second part was written English. Now, I am, though I say so myself, particularly good at written English. I've written numerous books. I've written for HarperCollins, Penguin, Element. I've written for Scholastic in America. I've written for The Guardian. I was the feature editor of a newspaper for 27 years. And they marked my paper down for the governor's exam to something like 20%. Seriously. They had to do that because the IQ test was up like a 140, 150. Yeah. So if they didn't mark it right down, I would have passed with flying colours.
You asked me whether I took the SO's exam, didn't you?
Yeah.
I told John I had grief with PO on K-Wing. He won't put me in for the exam, and anyone can go in for the exam. The governor sorted it, went back to him and said, have a word with this lad, you can't do what you're doing. I don't do myself any favours. The PO had me in. I've decided to put you in for the SO's exam. I let him give it all his spiel. Told him where to stick it. He asked me why I was being like that. I said, because as a manager, prison manager on the first step, if a PO above me, you're required, aren't you, to be compliant. If a governor is wrong about something and a PO and an SO and the officer's right, the officer's always wrong. And it works like that. If you're an SO, you do what the PO says. Yeah, you can't challenge him, you can't challenge governors. And me, I'd have been like John, I'd have just got in conflict. So, no promotion.
No promotion. So anyway, by this time, I'd accepted that, as far as a career was going, it wasn't really going to happen. All I was doing was marking time. But because of the problems I was experiencing in the prison with certain staff who were being aggressive and basically belligerent, I was put in charge of the records office. Now, the records office, every adult prisoner, male prisoner, that came into Strangeways had a file. And the file contained the committal warrant, the photograph, connections to their medical records, which were held by the hospital, all the rest of it. And they were held in an office. And basically, somebody who was coming in for 3 months would have a flimsy file, but somebody who was in for
career criminal,
life, they'd have a solid A4 file, with the, So I ran the records office, and when I took the records office over, it was all done by hand, by the way. There was no computers, pens and paper. We had a book, great big book, and everybody's name who was in the prison at that time was in that book. And I kept that book. Kept it every day. Everybody who came in, written in the book. Everybody who went out the book.
Did you get that job, do you think, because you were sort of away from the prison population? They couldn't get rid of you, obviously. You know, you weren't stupid or whatever, and you were fighting them. Do you think they put you there to sort of... Because you were problematic, they put you on one side?
I think that was partly it, and partly the fact that it needed sorting out. Because it was a mess. You know, the governors required early morning, they had to see all the new inmates, so they required all the records. Inmates who were on report, they had to have their annual records. When I was there, a guy was posted into the prison, Mad Frankie Fraser. We're using a name here, everybody knows the name.
Yeah.
Maniac, hitman for the Cray twins and the Richardsons in London. And everybody else had normal records like A4 files. Not Mad Frankie Fraser. He had a bloody cardboard box full of his stuff. And I thought, well, this is interesting. So I read Frankie Fraser's files. Seriously. Do you know that man had been whipped? Because the prison service, up until around about 1968, used to be able to sentence prisoners to be flogged with a cat of nine tails. And they used to tie them up to a triangular metal frame, and the prison staff, physical training instructors, would flog them with a cat of nine tails. And Frankie Fraser had been flogged twice. And at the time, they used to be able to sentence people to be on bread and water. That was, you got a £1 loaf of bread and as much water as you needed. But that was all you got. Now, that was in the prisons. That's what our prisons were up until 1968 or something like that, when they had a change of regime. But still they had the same mindset. But Frankie Fraser, I mean, if you'd been flogged once, I would think that'd be enough for you, wouldn't it?
Can't even imagine.
You know, Frankie Fraser, twice. And what a dangerous man. He'd been, I think it was in HMP Leeds, where he'd attacked a member of staff. Not, because Frankie Fraser was about 5'2". You know, you could have picked him up with one hand. You could have picked him up with one hand, but if you didn't break his neck and turned your back,
Yeah.
that's when he'd attack, and that's what he did. He attacked a member of staff with a metal chair, smashed it into the back of his head, and it dislocated his optic nerve, and the officer was blinded.
Wow.
I mean, this is a seriously dangerous man. I'll tell you a little bit more about what happened in my interactions with Frankie Fraser, because we did cross paths. And I didn't turn my back on him, let me tell you that.
No.
Because I'd read his file, I knew how dangerous the bastard was. So I was working down in the records office, and I'm getting rave reviews for this, because everybody's saying, oh, you've put this in order. And I actually wrote out how to run the office, you know, what you had to do on a daily basis. I think I had 3 staff as well, you know.
Did you think that maybe some niche place like that you could carry on in the prison service?
Yeah, I could have done, but I mean, I wouldn't want to do that. It's a dead-end job, innit? You know.
No interest.
Well, there's nothing in it, you know. I mean, I just sorted it out, and that was the end of that. But when I was working down there, Norman Brown, who shall be nameless,
The governor.
he was in his office, and the records office was, as you go into the front of Strangeways through the main gates,
Yeah.
the big old
Gate.
Victorian gates, go straight ahead, and that's F wing, yeah?
Yeah.
The governor's office was straight through on your right, and the records office was on your left, down the steps in like a dungeon area. So that's where I was, and Norman Brown was in his office. And I was down there one day. It would be about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and Norman Brown comes running down, and his face is all muck and... You maniac, look what you've done, you've burnt my office down. He'd been drinking in the club because that was his usual habit, to go in and have a load of beer, or whatever he drank. I don't know, I didn't go in
The
there.
on-site pub.
Yeah, the on-site pub, yeah. He'd get a load down his neck. And what he'd done was, because it was cold weather, he'd lit his gas fire, drawn the curtains in his office over the top of them, and fallen asleep. And the curtains had ignited and set his office on fire. And he'd come running down the office, blaming me. I had nothing to do with it. I mean, I managed to get people to help him put it out, but it wasn't anything to do with me. He's a strange character. Listen, he was the real old school. He was what's known as a screws governor. Yeah, he no matter what the screws did, no matter what the staff did, he was behind them. They were, and he was like the real cheerleader for them. Seriously. One day, he was apparently in his office, looking out the window, and saw one of the ship parcels come flying out. Yeah, somebody had obviously defecated into newspaper, wrapped
In
it
the
up,
cell, when they're still
wrapped
slapping
it
out.
up, and thrown it through the window. Now, you're number one governor of Strangeways Prison. What are you going to do? You look at it and think, yeah, well, that's just what happens here. I've seen it a lot of times. Not Norman Brown. He ran out of his office, ran round to where the parcel was on the floor. Seriously, picked it up with his hand, came into the jail at a fast pace, and we were on the landing, and he ordered one of the members of staff to open this cell, because he reckoned he'd identified where this parcel of crap came from. The officer opened the cell, and Norman Brown, the number one governor, threw this parcel of excrement straight at this inmate in the cell. It hit him on the shoulder, splattered all over the cell. Norman Brown was covered in excrement, all his hands dripping down his shirt. That was the number one governor. And he's shouting at him something like, "That'll teach you, you dirty bastard." Seriously, that was the number one governor. I mean, what possible hope have you got?
Well, I've heard stories about him, but
Have you not heard that one before?
no, I haven't, no.
No, well, that actually did happen. Listen, it was New Year's Eve, yeah? And I happened to be on nights. I don't know how that, I hated being on nights, I bloody hated nights. But I was on nights, generally patrolling the wing, you know what you do.
Yeah.
And it was about 12:15, and believe it or not, they opened the gate, the jail up, and in came Norman Brown with a brass band. They'd had a brass band on in the club where everybody had been getting pissed. Norman was obviously stoned out of his head, and he brought this brass band in to the middle of Strangeways Prison. And at 12:15 on New Year's Eve, they kicked up, playing, I don't know what they were playing, songs like All Things Bright and Beautiful in brass band. Massive, it was echoing all around the prison.
What was his...
What was his idea? I don't know, he was just having a laugh. It was his prison, he was do what he wants, He was playing a little game.
Are you shocked now? On reflection, obviously, 40 years ago, a lot of this stuff, isn't it? There or thereabouts.
Yeah, 40 years ago.
So you've got the number one governor in the prison pub, because that's what it were,
Yeah.
drinking with everyone. Is it any surprise that, he was a screws governor?
Well, that's what they did. That is what they did. I mean, I saw one principal officer who was into motorbikes bring his motorbike in, and he was working on his motorbike during nights. Yeah.
In the prison grounds.
In the prison, actually in the middle of the prison, right in the middle of the podium. Out in the middle.
Yeah.
And there, working on his motorbike, tinkering with it, kicked it up, and drove it all around the prison. Inside, boom, boom. There were a number of complaints. And on New Year's Day, who was taking the governor's meetings, with the prisoners? Norman Brown. He had an amazing ability to recover from alcohol. And there were prisoners lined up complaining about this brass band. And of course, Norman Brown's saying, "You've imagined this, get out. Next one. Yeah, fiction. Didn't happen, get out." That was Norman Brown. He was a character. Dangerous character if you've asked me, but he was definitely a character. He wasn't the only strange governor they had there. They had a deputy governor. This is no joke. I was again on nights. I mean, I didn't like these nights, you know. They just kept coming my way for some reason.
I wonder why, John.
I wonder why, yeah. Anyway, I was on nights again. And it would be about midnight. And this governor was brought to the main gates by the police. Apparently, he'd been arrested for being drunk and disorderly in Manchester. He was the deputy governor, by the way. Not the governor, the deputy governor. And he was brought in by the police, who said, "We've arrested this man for being drunk and disorderly. You know, he says he's the governor of the prison." And they said, "Do us a favour, get him to sleep it off. You know, we'll leave it, we'll just give him a warning at this time, you know." So he was put into the prison. They shut the gate behind him. Now, you normally would think, you know, if you got away with that, think yourself lucky.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and get your head down, you know. Not that nutter. He decided that he was going to do an inspection of all the Category A inmates.
Ooh.
So he got the principal officer, who was in charge of the prison for the night, to take him round all the Category A's. And he was staggering, pissed out of his head, this fella. Waking the inmates up at gone midnight, 12:30 and all that, waking them up. Now, if I'd have been the principal officer, and I would have said, not only are you not going to do that.
No. It's just inflammatory, that. It's going to cause problems, isn't it?
You're not doing that. I would have told him straight. But no, not the soft bastard took him round. I wouldn't have done that. But there's some strange people, you know. And he was strange.
You know, you have to wonder how these people get into these positions.
Yeah, I think, and basically, I mean, listen, if you're reasonably intelligent and you've got yourself into a good job like that, you'd behave yourself, wouldn't you?
Well, you would expect a standard of conduct, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Around about this time, I started running, because at the time I weighed about 15 stone. Which I'm only about 5'7", 5'8", you know, 15 stone's heavy, you know. If you look on that documentary, BBC documentary, you'll see that I'm quite a hefty piece of work there. So I decided that I was going to get fit. So I went to see the physical training staff.
Yeah.
And said, listen, because I knew they were runners, you know. And I said, I want to start running, because there was all the craze at the time of running marathons, you know. So I thought, I'll run a marathon, I'll get myself fit. So they thought this was hilarious, you know. They said, "Oh yeah, well, we'll test you." So they took me running one dinner time with the physical training staff. I didn't even have any running shoes. I had what they call like soft shoes, you know.
Plimsolls.
Yeah, something like that. So I went running in them, you know. And they took me up from Strangeways to Boggart Hall Clough, which is about 4 miles away. Ran around that, because by the time I've done this, I'm ready to collapse. You know, never run anywhere. Not since I left the army, never run at all, you know. Because being 15 stone, I'm hooping a load of weight round with me. You know, so I said, it's definitely difficult, this. I said, but I am going to do it. I'm going to run the Bolton Marathon, which was in August, I think. So they thought this was really funny, you know. They were saying, you do that, it'll kill you, you know, get your weight. So I said, I'll lose weight, don't worry. So I applied and paid to run the Bolton Marathon. And this is round about February, March, you know. So I haven't got a great deal of time to get fit.
Oh.
But I thought, I am definitely going to do this. So I ran every day, and I got myself some proper running shoes. I think they were called Adidas Marathon, which were expensive in them days, you know.
Yeah.
But £30-40 a pair, which I thought was expensive then.
I would imagine it was, yeah.
To me, yeah. But I got a proper pair of running shoes and I started running every day. Every day, and trained and trained and trained. And I went from 15 stone to 11 stone. I think I was about 4 stone, you know.
Yep.
I got really down, yeah. Anyway, I still went running with the training instructors, and they were still telling me, you know, you're never going to do this. And they were really fit, you know. They were professional.
That's all they did, innit?
Yeah,
they
that's all they did.
Live in the gym,
Yeah,
running.
that's it. So it came the day of the Bolton Marathon. I think it was 1981. It might have been 1980. I forget. It was run at Bolton. And I tell you who ran it, Jimmy Savile.
Oh God.
Yeah. Jimmy Savile was there. Big cigar. Guys and gals.
What a creature that
A
was.
creature, nasty piece of work, yeah. But he was running it. And also the physical training instructors were running it.
Yeah.
And I was running it. And the general gist of the thing was that they all thought I wouldn't get round. Anyway, 26 miles later, I'm about half a mile out from the end, and who should I pass but the training instructors?
Really?
Yeah.
Did you beat him?
Oh yeah, I beat them. Beat the lot of them. I did 3 hours 20 minutes for the marathon, which is average about 7 minutes a mile, you know, which is all right, really.
Yeah, steady Eddie, mate. It's something I'm never going to achieve.
Yeah, 3 minutes a mile. So anyway, I beat the training instructors, and
You're a dogged character, you aren't you?
don't give in, you see. If you give in, you've had it, you know. 'Cause, I mean, listen, I'm 73 this time, and people said to me, "What are you doing next?" Well, I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to Vegas. I'm starting a tour.
Tour doing.
Promoting a tour. It's called "Who Do You Think You Were?" And it involves myself and a Harley Street trained specialist who does past life regression. And between us, we put this show on where we take people back through their previous lives, and they recreate scenes that's happened to them before they were born in this life. Quite a fascinating thing.
I think people now will be thinking, you know, a lot of people struggle, don't they, with this sort of, when you talk about psychics and things like that. They always imagine sort of Gypsy Rosalie, Blackpool front, give us 20 quid, let me look at your palm, tall dark stranger.
Yeah, I mean, I know this sounds like unlikely, but the gypsies pay me to go and see them and give them psychic insights. I was paid by a group of gypsies from, it was just outside Cheetah Mill actually, and I didn't really think much about it when I got there, except the house was really untidy, and there was a group of women, they're all women or female gypsies, you know. And the first one that came in, she must have been about 20 stone, and her hands, great big hands with rings on every finger. And we sat down in the kitchen, and she plunked her hands on the table, just looked at me and said, "Go on then." Seriously. And the first thing that came to me was, and I said to her, "So there's a man here who tells me that he was hung in Mountjoy Jail in Dublin, in Ireland, and he knows you." She said, "That's my father, that." Seriously, yeah. And then I said, "And there's another man here." I said, "And he's walking up and down B-Wing at Strangeways."
Yeah.
So I know what B-Wing looks like.
Yeah.
I said, and he says he's got another year to do. That's my husband. Yeah, all in bloody jail.
When did this psychic thing come about, John?
Really, it started when I was about 6, but I've always been able to do it, but it never really occurred to me to do it professionally until I left the prison service. You know, I've always been able to see.
Perhaps we do an episode on your psychic abilities.
Yes, you see, I've not discussed this, but Strangeways is very haunted.
Loads of people have asked me
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very haunted.
About strange ways. Obviously, used to hang people. There used to be, well, you might know better than me. They did bury people in the grounds, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I was there when they were digging them up.
And I believe after the riots, they moved a lot of places to another cemetery. A lot of.
It was during the office renovations around about 1980. They were building another add-on to the offices, and they started digging up for the foundations and found the bodies. Now, I'll tell you about the ghosts of Strangeways. One of the ghosts of Strangeways is a former hangman. And and you see him walking down B1. And one night I was on patrol on B Wing, and I saw this man walking down, and this would be about 9:30 at night. This is after the lockdown, yeah? I saw a man with a dark suit on and a hat, carrying a case, walking down B Wing, went up the stairs, the metal stairs, towards the centre, and I'm down to find out who this is, you know, because there's only supposed to be me on that wing.
Yeah.
So I went down and I went to the principal officer who was in the box, you know. Said, this man's just come up here. I said, where's he gone? Who is he? He said, no, there's nobody in this jail. And it turned out, I think his name was Ellis. You know, who'd been the hangman prior to Pierrepoint. Yeah.
Pierrepoint, yeah. Albert Pierrepoint.
Albert Pierrepoint, yeah. He was the one. Now, also, I mean, if anybody's watching this now who actually works in Strangeways today, you can test this yourself. You'll find it, yeah? Go down onto B-Wing on B1. Walk right to the very end, from the centre to the very end, and on the left, the last cell on the left, that is where they held the condemned individual, the person that was going to be hanged. Now, the very first time I went into Strangeways, when I was on the induction process in 1975, I went to they took me down B-Wing, and I was just drawn to that cell. And I looked through and I could see there was somebody in there. And I got a terrible feeling of sadness, as if I wanted to break down in tears. You know, it was an oppressive depression, and I felt really unwell. And I said to the officer who was showing me around, I said, what's wrong here? Who's this man in this cell? He says, quite gruffly, you know, there's nobody in that cell, you know. I said, I've just seen somebody in the cell. And he took me to the cell, opened it up, and it was full of old tables and chairs. There was nobody in there. And I said, well, that's not what I saw. He said, it's the condemned cell. That's where they used to hold them. So they used to take them. There used to be a door in the wall, and they took them through there. And the hanging, the unit to hang them was through that wall.
When did they stop hanging? Do you know, John?
About 1963, I believe. Now, another real ghost of Strangeways, if you're in with Strangeways, go down B-Wing, go right to the end on the top left. Yeah, stand there for 5 minutes or 2 minutes and see how you feel. You'll feel the atmosphere go absolutely cold, and that's when you're meeting the spirits, because they're waiting to say hello. You know, they don't want to be dead. Now, there's another ghost at Strange. They're a prominent ghost. We talked about the hangman, talked about the condemned cell, but on the I think it's I-Wing, K-Wing. You know what K-Wing is?
Yeah.
Well, I-Wing, yeah.
Yeah.
On I-2 landing, I was the officer in charge of the hospital. We used to have a hospital unit there.
Is that what it used to be, the hospital wing?
Yeah, there used to be a hospital unit there. Not a hospital wing, but the hospital unit. Yeah. Where they did a clinic for all the remands, the Borstal boys and young prisoners, yeah? And I was on there one lunchtime, and this prisoner started banging on his door, bang, bang. So I went up and said, what is going on here? You know, stop it. And as I opened his door to talk to him, it was like a dark shape. It wasn't a fully materialised spirit, but it was a dark shadow that came out of his cell. And this guy was screaming and ranting. He said, there's a woman in my cell, a woman in my cell. You know, and of course there wasn't a woman in his cell. But I asked, senior staff what was going on here, because I'd seen this dark shape. And they said, oh, that's the cell where they held Mrs. Murrayfield, who was an infamous murderess. She'd killed this old woman, poisoned her, put poisoned arsenic in the jam and killed her for her inheritance, And she was held on I2 landing at Strangeways, and that was her cell. And she's still haunting it.
Do people talk about these things a lot? The sort of history and...
Well, they did at the time, but don't forget we're going back 40 years.
Yeah, the thing is, they're always going to be negative places, these, aren't they? As in, people don't want to be there, a lot of staff don't want to be there, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you'll feel it. I mean, there's what's known as residual energy, where it gets into the actual fabric of the prison, into the walls. A lot of people see repetitive actions, like a headless ghost walking across the thing. It's not actually a ghost. It's like a replay when the atmospheric conditions are absolutely right. It's like a video recording. It's like the stones, the bricks, the actual fabric of the place is replaying it back. But the atmospheric conditions have to be absolutely right. And when they are, then you can see. But what you're seeing is not a ghost. It's like a reproduction, like a holographic image that's being reproduced through the atmospheric conditions that are interacting with the stones. Very often, incidents of a high emotion will burn themselves into the atmosphere. And you can feel it to a certain extent and see it, but it isn't an entity. An entity is a ghost, is actually interacting with you. That's a spirit that is coming back from the next dimension to actually give you a message, or perhaps malevolently. Because the spirit world is very much like this world. You've got good people and you've got bad people. And you've got angry people and you've got maniacs. And don't think just because you've passed into the next dimension you're going to change. There is what's known as the survival of personality. So that as you are here, so you will be in the next dimension. And they do say birds of a feather flock together. So if you are particularly good and decent and honest, like most people, then you've got nothing to worry about, because that's what will happen when you step into the next dimension. But if you've been a bad bastard and you indulged yourself into all kinds manner of nastiness, that's what you'll get when you get through to the next side. You're welcome to the club.
Strangeways Club, the pub.
There was one, listen, that pub, there was a group of them in there who were notorious. They used to, at night, if they got somebody in there that they thought was they'd have a bit of fun with, they used to grab them, rip all the clothes off and throw them naked. There was two doors, one at the top where you went in,
yeah,
and another door further down, which was like a fire exit. And they used to strip them naked and throw them out into Southall Street, which is the big street going up, and throw them into the street stark naked. One guy who was a prison officer there, they grabbed him and he was pleading, oh no, please don't. When they ripped his trousers off, he was wearing suspenders and frilly knickers.
Really?
Yeah. Some kind of kinky thing he had on going for him. Yeah.
Now when you talk about things like this, it like with Smiling, it must have been for the people terrifying. It's.
If you didn't expect that, don't go in. Seriously, there was one guy there. They used to call him the Rocking Vicar. He was a clergyman,
Yeah.
Dog collar, all the lot. And he used to go in, and he got this idea that he was one of the lads, I'm a pint of Boddington's bitter,
Yeah.
Same script. Ripped all his clothes off. stark bollock naked threw the vicar into the street. Yeah, they didn't care that long. They were nuts. One night, I didn't often go into the club, but this night I did go in because they had
Was that a dangerous place for you?
a bit, yeah. I tell you, one night I went in. I took the 2 solicitors with me that were teaching me at university. I said, come in and have a look. So I stood at the bar with them, and 2 chief officers who were in the bar came up and said, get out. You're not allowed in here. You're not allowed to bring the press. I said, this is not the press. This is Professor such a body, from Manchester University.
Yeah.
And, oh, no, it's not. We know what you're doing, Sutton. Now get out. And the whole lot came at us, so we had to leave. Yeah. Otherwise, who knows, they'd have attacked us. They were bloody nuts at times. One night, as I say, I was in there.
I can't understand why you go in.
Well,
you know what? You're one of them people, aren't you?
I didn't give a shit.
Well, exactly. That's it, isn't it?
They were attacking me.
That's it. You're going to do whatever you're going to do,
Yeah.
and nobody's going to tell you not to do it. You're proper stubborn.
Yeah, well, a madman.
Yeah, I would say definitely mad.
Yeah, mad. So I was in there, and they had a show on. You see, that's why I went in. I wanted to see this particular thing. It was a hypnotist, yeah? And it was quite packed. I think it was a Saturday night, and I'd just finished 9 o'clock at night, so I went in to have a look at this. And the hypnotist was on, and he got this volunteer from the audience who happened to be the eldest daughter of the number 1 chief officer.
Yep.
She was about 19 years of age, quite a pretty young lady. And he got her hypnotised, and he said to her, I want you now to realise that you're just about to enter this room. It's full of men, except you are stark naked. Now go forward and enter this room. Of course, she was in like a trance. He said, I want you to react to these men. So everybody's watching this, and she walks forward, throws herself on the floor, lifts her legs in the air and shouts, come on, fucking go.
No.
Yeah, the chief officer who was watching this, and his daughter's on the floor with that. But he puts the table down. There was beer all over the place, glasses smashed, and he's chasing this hypnotist. It was absolutely hilarious.
There's no bounds, is there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it was crazy. They did all that stuff. And staff were getting done for drunken driving. They were going in there, getting stashed up and getting arrested. One of them, I think I read a couple of them lost their jobs, for being drunk driving. Because the police knew.
Yeah.
They got the car of the thing. They're in the club. When they come out, stop them and arrest
It
them.
weren't only Strangeways that had a club, was it?
No, I was in one night in Bootle Street in Manchester, which was the police station in Manchester, just off Deansgate, yeah? And it was my brother who was a detective inspector, and he was getting married for the second time. And I went to, he said, come in, it's my stag night, and we'll have a drink in the bar. Well, I'm driving, so I'm not going to have anything, but out of politeness,
Yeah.
I went in to have I had a shandy, I think, one of these ordinary bottle shandies, not, just that's all I had. And my brother said, oh, I'd like you to meet Chief Superintendent such a body, who's the head of the CID for Manchester, I said, no, nice to meet you. And this guy said to me in a rather supercilious manner, said, oh, you're Martin's brother. I said, I am indeed, yeah. He said, tell me, John, he said, why do you think so many police officers are divorced? I said, are you being serious? He said, oh, of course I'm being serious. I said, well, here we are in Bootle Street Police Station Club. I said, it's now 9 o'clock at night. I said, if you have a look around, all these CID officers, all your staff, I said, they're getting pissed out their heads. I said, by the time they finish this lot, about 10 o'clock, they're going off to the Millionaires Club, Mr. Smith's, trapping off with all that's available in Manchester, and they'll arrive home at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I said, stoned out their head,
Yeah.
having nailed anything they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
I said, and that is why police officers are getting divorced. I said the same thing with my brother. Well, you should have seen my brother's face. And this chief superintendent, he weren't at all amused.
It's right though, isn't it?
He weren't amused. My brother said, you're making me look a right twat.
What did he think you were going to say?
I don't know. I'm telling the truth. I mean, listen, nobody likes a glass better than me. I've got a bar, for goodness sake.
Yeah, true.
See it? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I'm not hiding that. I never drink in the week,
Yeah.
and I never drink without my wife.
Yeah.
Because I'm a married man.
You know what? Big divorce rate, police. I would imagine. Well, I know a lot of people, prison officers, a lot end up alcoholics, a lot of relationship breakups. A lot of people who ask me about joining the job, I always ask them, young people and whatever, but people who've got families, just say, you have to look at your family or whatever, because I've seen people in there who, when they go out, I stopped going out with them. Screws dudes, as they call them. When I was on K-Wing, I went on a few, but basically people act like animals. They would get drunk, fight each other, sleep with each other. Like you say, it was just...
Yeah.
And that's all some people did. It was just, you know what I mean, live the life and...
These prison clubs. I mean, one day when I was in London, I was in Holloway. I went to Holloway, taking an inmate to have a visit with his wife. And whilst he was conducting that visit, we went, myself and my other colleague, went into the prison club at Holloway. It's a female prison, or it was, in central London. And I had a lemonade, and I was doing the Telegraph crossword. That's what I used to do. And I was sat at the table doing that. My mate, who was a bit of a boozer, he had a pint, and he went to do the one-armed bandit,
Yeah.
Can't stand them thing. I don't understand it.
No, I don't either.
But seriously, he went on. Anyway, I was just sat there doing the crossword quietly, and I heard this hell of a kerfuffle at the back of the club. And I looked up, and my mate's coming running towards me. He says, "We're getting out of here, come on." I said, "Well, what the hell's happened?" Apparently, he was doing the one-armed bandit, and he dropped the jackpot, and he got about 30 quid or something like that.
Yeah.
And as he dropped it, this huge female jailer came up to him and said, "Half of that's mine." Apparently she'd been playing the one-armed bandit, gone to the bar to get some change, and my friend had gone forward and...
Yeah. Well, people do play them, don't they? They build
Yeah.
up to the jackpot. And...
Yeah. But she didn't get it, he got it. So he said, must be joking, I mean, in fact, piss off. And she'd hit him. Smacked my mate in the head. Fortunately, he was a big fella like you, and he, boom. So as I look him back, she's on the floor, sparked out, yeah?
Yeah.
And me and my mate, we'd done a runner, yeah? I haven't getting involved in it, but
Can you remember this all clear as day?
clear as day, I have a photographic memory. I can remember photographs. No, seriously, I have
Yeah.
a very good memory.
Yeah.
And I can remember it. Quite frightening, really, that. Because if they got hold of us, who knows? How are we doing for time?
Right, so we're heading up to about 1 hour 20, yeah? So the camera will be on its last legs.
Right, okay. So basically, we're up to the point where I'm in strange ways. I've gone through all this nonsense. The trade union has been attacked left, right and centre.
Yeah.
I am preparing now to make a step away from that because I've got to do something.
Yeah.
So I applied to become a hospital officer. Because I couldn't go on messing about on the landings. I couldn't do that.
Have you got a lot of tales as an hospital officer?
Absolutely.
Are we going to put them in one episode?
You'll get them in one episode.
So shall we call it quits today? Leave people with the fact that you're some mad psychics, I'm sure. However, that's what you look like.
Really?
I think you do look like some sort of mysterious guy. Go and have a look at John's channel. Been around a while. I very therapeutic, some of your
Is it?
storytelling. Yeah.
All right. Hope so, yeah. So have a look at my website, psychicworld.net. And don't forget to get my book.
Tell me the website. I'll put that, like everything else, links in the description. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean, people don't know this, but I mean, I have worked with the biggest names in the psychic world. I mean, I was the guy behind Derek Acora. You ever seen a thing called Most Haunted?
yeah,
Yeah, well, I was behind that.
Really?
Guy. Yeah.
I'm wondering. Have you been on TV?
Yeah, I've done a lot of it.
I'm wondering whether on his YouTube channel it's got this mad art. Yeah, yeah, mad art. I'm thinking that maybe, or it might be just from watching your channel. But yeah, definitely interesting.
Thank you.
No, thank you, John G. Sutton. The Psychic Screw. That's where it comes from, guys.
That's it. The Psychic Screw. Get
Thank-
my book on Amazon.
Yeah, definitely. The link's there. The book disappeared. Somebody messaged me and asked for the link. It disappeared for a while, did it not?
Yeah.
The link, we thought something dodgy were going on there, but yeah,
I reckon MI5's reading it.
quite possibly. The Psychic Screw, John G. Sutton. Back soon. Al City. Cheers again, mate. A pleasure.
Was that interesting?
It